Senior Regulatory Officer at PATH. It is my pleasure to serve as a chair of this panel. And considering how interesting this topic is and that we were fortunate enough to get quite a few distinguished panelists, we got approval from organizer to hold this panel for a full hour, not only 40 minutes. So even when 40 minutes expire, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm going to be checking my phone for your questions and try to answer as many of them as possible. So I would like, without further ado, I would like to introduce our four distinguished panelists. We have Dr. Gustavo Mendez, who is a General Manager of Medicines and Biologics at Anvisa, and he's online with us. Dr. Patricia Aprea, who is Director of Evaluation and Control of Biologics and Radiopharmaceuticals in ANMAT. Mariluz Pombo, Advisor of Vaccines and Biotechnology Products and Health System and Services at PAHO. We have here with us in Brazil, in Rio, we have Imelda Jordan, Head of Regulatory and Quality of Afrigen. Analia Acebal, Director of Operation and Development in Synergium, and Dr. Roseanne Kuber, who is Quality Control Director at Biomanguinhos. So let me kick off this panel with the questions that we already received some of you, and I would open discussion by asking Dr. Patricia Aprea from ANMAT to tell us a little bit more about collaborative efforts and procedures between ANMAT and the other national regulatory authorities, and how this pandemic, COVID pandemic, had impacted this type of efforts. Dr. Aprea?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thanks for being invited to participate of this panel, and to the audience for being with us. To talk about, sorry, I am a little dysphonic, to talk about how to contribute in the development of new COVID vaccines in the post-pandemic era. I have to refer to three main aspects: how we were prepared to deal with the pandemic situation with an unknown virus and their variants, the cooperation between regulatory authorities, and interaction with researchers, developers, and industry, and finally lessons learned and proposals. Cooperation, collaboration, and convergence are essential mechanisms to be used. It is well known that COVID pandemic represented a great challenge for all the regulatory authorities, and I will refer to our experience. When COVID pandemic situation arose, we have already developed and implemented a manual for management of sanitary emergency and catastrophes situations. It was in accordance with our two strategic plans mandates and was based on recommendations and guidelines issued by international organizations like PAHO and WHO, and taking into account experiences of other regulatory authorities, knowledge obtained from participation of forums like CEPI, and on our experience. The manual addresses the three dimensions to guarantee the essential functions while attending the emergent problematic, and to evaluate and to improve strategic.
Dr. Aprea, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are not seeing the change of the slides. I assume you're going through your slides. We still see only the first one.
Now?
No, we see the outline of the slides on the left side, but we only see your introductory slide.
Sorry.
Now it's moving. Now we see the second one.
Now?
We see the second slide. We don't see it in a presentation mode though.
It is in presentation mode.
It is not.
Well, I do not have ever. Sorry.
Okay, now we.
Now?
No, now it's happened. Okay, now we see the second slide is in presentation mode. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about sorry. Well, I was talking about we have a manual for management of sanitary and emergencies and catastrophe situations. It addresses 3 dimensions to guarantee the essential functions while attending the emergent problematic and to evaluate and to improve strategies, and that human services, regulatory policies and knowledge generations are elements to be considered. To guarantee essential functions, we have to deal with pandemic situation, but as well was an extensive quarantine in our country. So we have to work at adapting processes and procedures in a remote form. GMP inspections schedule was reviewed. We use remote procedures for local GMP inspections, and for GMP inspections abroad, reliance mechanisms already existed previously to pandemic, so we use it. We prioritize the assessment of marketing authorization and the variations of COVID vaccines in an expeditious procedures, generating guidelines with essential requirements in view of some limited information available, such as stability or clinical aspects. Our course, of course, testing for low release only was done on vaccines manufactured in Argentina. We worked closely with manufacturers of COVID vaccines for the analytical tech transfer uses in our lot release process. We have to review our research and development programs, as well of the extension, exchange, and training programs, and regulatory development. We only develop regulation only if needed to attend issues of pandemic situation. For attendance of the emergency situation, a working team of biologics for COVID pandemic was established. The functions assigned to this team were to acquire knowledge about the new virus and its variants, the pathology and the epidemiology, production and platforms available for the manufacture of vaccines, new therapies in development. Actions to be taken were to contact developers, researchers, and industry to take knowledge of vaccine and other immunobiological developments in course, and of potential submission of marketing authorizations, applications, gradual evaluation processes for marketing authorization was implemented. An assistant team accompanied projects of vaccines development and processes of manufacturing transfer. Sorry if you can hear me well, but my voice, I can.
Yeah, we can hear you well. We have 2 more minutes on that question, on this question, and then we're moving on, but we can hear you well.
In relation with cooperation between regulatory authorities and interaction with researchers, developers, and industry, we cooperated bringing information on our assessment of vaccines dossier, release results, submitting and exchanging GMP reports with some regulatory authorities. We could exchange information on regulatory issues of vaccines applications and criteria uses in the evaluation, and we are available to conduct analytical testing on products when it was requested. With our jurisdictional health ministry, we collaborate bringing them information about authorities' vaccines and their characteristics, load releases and distributed, and by advising on other problems with cold chain. The early interaction, about the early interaction with industry and developers, we work with them in tech transfer with special teams dedicated to as three aspects, main three aspects, just technical, regulatory, and operative. Close monitoring was fundamental. The analytical transfers of method uses in the quality control from the company to us was done because the later future lot of release. We're also working in the system of projects linked with innovative products through the assistant program for development and production of strategic biological. Finally, I would like to mention some practices I could observe during the pandemic. Reliance mechanisms is too much mentioned by some authority regulatory, but in practice that doesn't occur. GMP inspection represents one of such situations. Inspections are repeated instead of considering those conducted by other regulatory authority with similar regulatory requirements and being member of the same cooperation scheme or regional or bilateral agreements. Frequently, on-site inspections are not communicated. An invitation is, of course, only to participate of the closure meeting. The same for testing for lot release instead of accept results from RNA or for origin of the products. It was repeated. Not participation or poor participation in seminars or exchange activities generated by PAHO, WHO, or CEPI. These activities are of excellent quality and a great opportunity to share information. There was not too much opportunity to have a space for discussion on experiences and evaluations of dossier of vaccines submitted by companies, relevant regulatory actions or decisions related to products and manufacturing sites. Not always shares, however, the products were worldwide or regional distribution. We know that society demands us confidence and clarity on our processes, while industry needs certainty and an environment to their competitive. Both demands quality, but celerity in our decisions. Cooperation, collaboration, and convergence are the ways that could help us to reach the objectives, and regulatory science and excellent research to be used to convince those who know more about some problematic. We should not be an adiabatic organization. About my proposal to generate or improve the regulatory environment, to reinforce the concept of reliance, to facilitate regulatory processes for new vaccines of sanitary interest, to access in advance to details of characteristics or the process linked with development of new vaccines of sanitary interest in order to design a program to support them, better communication to researchers, development, and industry of a change in the regulatory environment for vaccines authorization, to work closely with areas on shared projects to generate spaces of exchange and discussions requirements. And we think the Forum for Biologicals in the Americas could be an appropriate space to initiate this discussion. Sorry, but I have no voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this thorough overview, and thank you for staying longer to be able to participate in this discussion. So moving forward to Dr. Mendez from Anvisa, I know that there are many manufacturers here in the audience and also online, and while this conference or this panel is called Challenges in Post-Pandemic Era, we are aware that pandemic is not over, but we are equally aware that we are not in February 2020 and that expectations and possibilities for manufacturers to actually meet some clinical endpoints that previously been used might differ now. So questions that I'm sure many have on their mind is what is the expectation? What are the thoughts of Anvisa and your thoughts on potential and clinical endpoints or expectations for manufacturers to apply for marketing application for future COVID vaccines?
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there with you, but I believe that it's awesome that we can have this meeting right this way, right? So this question is really very important for us, and this is something that we are taking a look very especially because we understand that there is a lot of platforms, a lot of new initiatives of vaccines for COVID-19 that this is. That's why I'm happy to announce that we are
have a bit of technical issues here. Can you hear us?
Hello. Yes, you can hear me. Hello.
Yes, now I can. Would you mind repeating last maybe 30 seconds?
Okay, no problem.
Just last 30 seconds.
Can you hear me? All right. Well, I'm happy to share that we are about to release a guidance that talk about new platforms and new vaccine, COVID-19 vaccines and the requirements for approval of those here in Brazil. And I'd like to give you highlights on what is the thought and what is the expectation we have as regulatory agency. Well, the first thing that is important for me to say is that immunobridging studies is a possible approach and would be acceptable for us to approve a vaccine. Of course, we have some requirements, and one of those include that the study should be conducted against a vaccine that is already approved, already registered here by the agency, and that have shown the efficacy and the safety expected for the approval here in Brazil. And we understand that two kind of studies should be presented when we think about this approach of immunobridging. First one is the non-clinical endpoints, and for that we expect to have relevant studies on challenge models, challenge animal models that appropriately show us that it was verified as relevant, and also the characterization of comparative profiles of immunogenicity, including cell immunogenicity and antibody immunogenicity. So this is for non-clinical aspects. And for clinical aspects of immunobridging, the expectation we have is the randomized clinical trial study controlled by placebo or controlled by a vaccine and double-blind. And for this clinical evaluation, we have discussed two primary endpoints that we understand that that's pivotal for any decision for our experts. So first, the comparative evaluation with demonstration of non-inferiority or superiority of the mean titles of neutralizing antibodies induced by the candidate and the comparator, and of course the evaluation with demonstration of non-inferiority or superiority on the seroconversion of neutralizing antibodies. So we understand that these two endpoints would be the pivotal, the most important in our perspective, to have a look on what is the performance of the vaccine. And of course, we intend also to advise on secondary outpoints, which include the immunogenicity against the variants of concern. And we know that this may change depending on the time of the vaccine was studied and the time of the when the vaccine will be available here, and the full characterization and the comparative immunogenicity profile of the candidate and the comparator, including the immunity mediated by cell. So this is pretty much the immunobridging approach. And of course, the randomized clinical trial for the efficacy would be an approach acceptable, but of course the feasibility is something that should be considered when we think about the development of a vaccine. And to finish my talk, we have seen and we have receiving some applications for vaccines to be used as booster vaccines for other technologies. And when we have this kind of approach, we have to be also worried about when is the proper time to apply a booster. So studies that show what is the decay on the protection and how we should consider the proper time to use the vaccine as a booster dose, and of course the feasibility and the applicability here in Brazil. So this is pretty much what is the main aspect of the guideline we are supposed to issue. But of course, I'm happy to take any questions if there is any. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure there are going to be many questions on that. Can you just briefly maybe comment on when the guidance can be expected? You say that it's in a pipeline. When do you see this coming out?
We already have the final text internally, and it's, I believe that about 2 weeks we will have something. Thank
you so much. In interest of time, we are moving to Dr. Mariluz Pombo from PAHO. Dr. Pombo, if you can, I know that PAHO been working on regulatory system strengthening efforts, and in speaking with you a few days ago, I did understand that a COVID pandemic did have some impact on that, and it would be great if you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Thank you very much, Yelena, and thank you very much to all the panelists and the organizers of this particular session. It's a pleasure for PAHO to accompany this initiative, as well as other initiatives that are aligned in order to strengthen the relationships between regulators and manufacturers to improve access to essential health products. So as Yelena was mentioned and asked us to provide an insight of the lessons learned from the pandemic and regulatory preparedness, what we have seen in the last decade since PAHO is collectively working with all the regulatory agencies of the region as well as industry associations is that countries today face new challenges for building efficient regulatory systems that are integrated into the health systems. Although over the past decade, the region has taken a successful approach to improving regulatory capacities, use of regional and multinational approaches has been improved regulatory capacities in countries with main structural challenges inherent to the small markets. The region has made a huge progress in terms of regulatory convergence and harmonization in search of efficiencies. But despite this progress, there are clear challenges and asymmetries that persist in the region of the Americas. So although there is not a single model for a regulatory system, PAHO and WHO recommends a series of principles and elements and functions for the construction of effective regulatory systems. The strongest NRAs in the region are characterized by legal and organizational frameworks that give them the independence and a strong mandate to oversight and enforcement the regulations locally. There is an increase in digital publication of regulatory decisions that can contribute also to building trust among regulatory agencies and to promote transparency, exchange of information on particular products, to improve also the market surveillance. But regulatory systems must definitely include the use of risk-benefit criteria to regulate and supervise a full range of health technologies of interest for the health system. It's not only about vaccines, it's also about other health technologies that are required, especially in pandemic circumstances. PAHO has several mandates as part of their technical cooperation activities to build capacities in countries, especially those that are promoting local manufacturing capacities. We have been in several initiatives with ministries of health that are willing and are putting a lot of financial resources to develop local capacities for manufacturing, but there has to be an alignment between the regulatory capacities in place to create what we call the proper environment to support those initiatives and to be able to not only provide guidance to the health system, but also to provide guidance to those manufacturers on how to anticipate what the requirements and what the processes are for supervising and enforce what we call the life cycle of a particular product. Regarding clinical trials, this is a matter, and I'm just mentioning this because of the previous intervention from Gustavo. There is a huge number of clinical trials that are being promoted by manufacturers in Latin America and the Caribbean. However, many countries have limited capacity for control and oversight of those clinical trials. So it's very important that manufacturers also consider that when a new product is developed or is the advice from regulatory bodies that are more strongest in terms of regulatory oversight to provide this feedback that is required for developing of new products or new indications or changes after the first approval are discussed with those mature regulatory agencies. Otherwise, there could be a huge difference on how each NRA will deal with these issues. So regulatory systems play a key role during the public health emergencies, but countries do not always have the regulatory preparedness plan for those emergencies. And although several NRAs have adopted measures to address the regulatory problems related to promoting the timely access and exchange of information among countries during COVID-19, there has been several tensions to respond to the emergencies, looking for ways to relax regulatory measures for the emergency, but it is critical to safeguard the technical independence of the NRAs so that they can make unbiased decisions and monitor product performance during emergencies in order to prevent the use of products of substandard characteristics. So that's what I would like to highlight as part of this intervention, and will be more than happy to stay longer and listen also to the other participants that are part of this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is very valuable information. And we do have today regulatory representatives from 3 different manufacturers. So also to provide their view of what they observed during the pandemic and what they saw as the challenges. And I hope that this discussion actually facilitates some future discussions. And so moving forward with the panelists, I will now turn to Dr. Imelda Jordan, who is Head of Regulatory Quality in Afrigen. And one of the questions that we had for you are to describe in kind of main brushstrokes, what are the regulatory challenges that are seen from her perspective, working as a Head of Regulatory and Quality in Afrigen, which is, as we heard in a previous session, company in South Africa. Imelda.
Can you hear me? Yeah, better. Thank you. No, thank you, Yelena. And yeah, what a great privilege to be here and enjoy the company of so many experts. Yes, of course, in Afrigen, we also do have our challenges from a regulatory perspective. Apart from just the product development, we also need to get our facility ready. So yes, we do have a facility readiness challenge, starting absolutely from scratch and building that up within the complete facility, which does not meet only the hub, but also the other part of the manufacturing units that's within Afrigen. Yes, it's been clearly indicated from the pressure that's there currently on the regulatory requirements and the procedures that need some level of to be adapted. But we cannot lose any of the regulatory and scientific evaluation. So if we look at our challenges, and definitely one of the key are the material requirements, the shortages of material, starting material, other raw materials, reagents, your lipids. There's a shortage, there's a long waiting period, and that becomes part of this critical materials that we're required to work on. And then also the equipment, long waiting periods for critical equipment in various phases of our manufacturing. And it's just actually brought you to a point that you cannot really move forward. And there isn't easier ways to work around it. So that is, of course, also a challenge for us. Then the manufacturing process is also complex. And for that also brings some new inherent challenges in the technology, what we required, safety and efficacy in the procedures of the drug substance and the drug product. And a lot of that is built into the manufacturing process that's required. Optimization process is another challenge for us. And then also if you look at your skilled staff base or people base, the skills, they are definitely there, but there are certain areas that we still require specialist skills and that we can adopt from. Yeah. So in short, Afrigen is not unique when it comes to some of the problems that we have, but we challenge it day by day, and we're working on each. We've got a very strong, dedicated, hardworking team that we work with, and I can salute them all and the fantastic work that they're doing in Afrigen.
Thank you so much, Imelda. Thank you so much. And yes, since PATH is supporting Afrigen in some of these efforts, I can also add that Afrigen is doing tremendous work and tremendously good job despite all these challenges. I know, speaking previously with you, Analia, that some of those challenges that Imelda just brought up, you're sharing as well. Would you like, or would you mind sharing some of your perspective on challenges that manufacturers are seeing, and especially in the context of COVID pandemic?
Sure.
Could you hear me? Yes. Yes, for when we discuss, really there are some of the challenges that are exactly the same for the different countries, and the suppliers, materials, lead times for equipment, reagents. This is something that is happening. It happened before, and during the pandemic was increased, and it's a big issue for all the manufacturers and in the development stage as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And last but not least, we want to hear from the host company here. We have Dr. Zan Kuber from Biomanginos. Something that was brought up in our conversation, but I don't know the other manufacturers are asking as well. During this fast development, one often, not always, rely on contract manufacturing companies, CDMOs, to support either certain part of manufacturing or certain phase, even product for certain phase. Something that you want to share about regulatory challenges that you observe there, or just general thoughts on it?
Okay. Thank you, Yelena, for the question. First of all, I'd like to thank you, the organization, for inviting me for this panel with so many special people here, the regulators and the manufacturers. Due to the accelerated development and the need of multiple sites, with the overall complexity of vaccines, a significant number of post-change approval are needed within the short period of time to reflect the maintenance and the optimization of the manufacturing process, as well as expiry dates, extensions, the problem with additional raw material sourcing. Sometimes due to the lack of the supply chain, we have to change the raw materials. Also manufacturing and testing capacity to expand supply. So this post-approval changes is very important to think about. Change is inevitable in this process. So we need to innovative solutions on the regulatory framework. For instance, well-established comparability protocols between the CDMOs and the tech transfer sites. Also, mutual recognition and reliance between the NRAs to facilitate also vaccine development and the production and the access of the vaccines. So I think it's important, the discussion of the post-approval change, the quickness of this response from the NRA for this change, because for us it's very important to have this change approved and implemented if we want to develop and to supply vaccines for everyone.
Thank you so much. So let me just quickly check with our organizer. Do we have a few minutes for a question or two? 5-ish minutes. Okay. I did not see any questions coming to my chat, but we have some questions from before. One that was brought up would be for you, Gustavo. And it's expectations of using non-human primates for enabling phase 1 study with the platform that already been used in clinical trials, maybe not identical product, but let's say self-replicating RNA platform being used, the mRNA platform being clearly used. So any thoughts on that? I understand that it's project specific, but just general thoughts.
We tend to be very flexible on the non-clinical development of vaccines. Of course, that we have to be very confident that this data would provide us the information we need to move forward to clinical development. But we are open for scientific discussions, and the guidances we have are very flexible. So we'll be happy to receive any justification and discussion on that.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thank you. The other brief question for maybe Marie-Luz. I know that some manufacturers brought up the question of digitalized platform that would be part of harmonization So applying information or submitting information to one regulator, if that can be shared automatically with the others. So there is no even separate application from different regulators. Any thoughts on that shared digitalized platform for sharing information or for submission of dossiers?
So thank you very much, Yelena. Regarding that question, what I particularly could share, I don't know if there is a microphone open that creates an echo when I intervene.
We can hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So
perfectly.
Let me go ahead. So regarding a platform for facilitating information exchange. So what we have seen as part of the pandemic response, as a good lesson learned, let's call it, was the initiative for WHO pre-qualification, in particular pre-qualification of vaccines, in which confidentiality agreements were signed among regulators and WHO pre-qualification unit to access the whole platform with information from every single vaccine that was EUL by WHO. So regulators could access directly the information through that platform. I don't have the details on that type of platform that allows to handle that amount of data, but it also includes post-approval changes. It includes the basic information that was presented for the application, in the initial application from each individual manufacturer. And it also includes the assessment reports that were prepared by the different specialists that collaborate as part of the assessment that WHO performed. So that's one. In the region of the Americas, there was also another platform that we know very well because it was sponsored by some of the regulatory agencies. It's located at PAHO, in which under confidentiality agreements also reliance principles are promoted for the certified program of inspectors. It was an initiative by IMDRF partners, and is built, is available, and regulators can also share information under confidentiality agreements in which PAHO does not see the information. It's a space that is created for facilitating exchanges among regulators, but it's a space for regulators only. And therefore was built because of a need expressed by member states. But regarding applications from manufacturers in response to regulatory requirements, of course, every single NRA has a different system to handle those applications. And this may be a question to be addressed by regulators and not by an international organization. But those are the good examples that I can highlight.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so we can't go any further, but I want to thank our colleague panelists and regulators and PAHO and manufacturers for kindly participating in this panel. I do want to thank the organizer for giving us opportunity to raise such important questions and for giving us time to discuss this. So thank you all very much. We will get back with more questions for sure.